I watched from the far end of the room, the chair beneath me colder than the glances I'd been given since I walked in. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and read out the words that tore my name out of my father's legacy. "And to my daughter, I leave my love." That was it. Just love. No land, no shares, no house, no explanation. Meanwhile, my brother smirked as the lawyer continued, listing everything being handed to him. The estate, the vineyard, even the lake house where I spent every summer with Dad. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. No tears, no outbursts, just silence. Because I knew something no one else in that room did. My father had made another will, a real one I had locked away, one they thought didn't exist anymore. And they were about to learn that forgetting me wasn't just cruel, it was foolish. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was hurt, that had already been done years ago, but because I kept hearing those words. I leave my love, like I was some distant charity case my father pitied. The truth. He loved me deeply. We were close, closer than anyone knew. But ever since my brother started managing his affairs, something shifted. Phone calls stopped. Messages were intercepted. And now I understood why. I sat at my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the old envelope. Yellowed edges, handwritten initials, and a date 6 months before the one they read at the lawyer's office. It was the original will, notarized, signed, and stored in my safe ever since Dad handed it to me just in case. I never imagined I'd need it. I thought family would protect family, but I wasn't naive anymore. I knew the war had already started. They just didn't know I had already won the first battle. The weekend after the reading, my brother threw a celebration. Not a private dinner, not a respectful gathering, a full-blown party at the vineyard with string lights, catered meals, and live jazz. I wasn't invited, of course, but I went. I wore black. Not because I was mourning, but because I knew they'd never forget the way I looked that night. When I arrived, silence spread like smoke. I walked past distant cousins and forced smiles. My brother greeted me with a flute of champagne and a performance. "Glad you're here," he whispered, leaning in. "I was afraid you'd be bitter." I smiled. "Why would I be bitter?" I asked. "You've already won, right?" He laughed, but his eyes flicked with suspicion. He knew me better than he liked to admit. And deep down, he felt the shift. Something was off. But still, he clinked his glass, raised a toast to himself, and thanked everyone for being part of Dad's legacy. He didn't know the real legacy was still in my hands. If this story resonates with you, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more people discover these true stories of silent power. That night, when I returned home, I placed both wills side by side on the dining table, the one they presented at the reading, and mine. The difference was glaring. His version had my father's name typed at the bottom, barely legible, detached. But mine was handwritten in blue ink, bold, firm, with a small smudge where he'd paused to clear his throat, something he always did when nervous. I remember watching him sign it. He looked me in the eye and said, "This is my voice if they ever try to silence you." I never forgot that. Now, his voice was about to speak louder than they ever anticipated. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not the family's, but my own, a woman I trusted. She read it carefully, nodded, then said something that made my heart beat with both fear and resolve. "If this holds up in court, your brother's going to wish he never touched the envelope." The summons was delivered on a Tuesday morning. I didn't send a warning, didn't call ahead. I let the silence speak for me. My brother opened the envelope in the middle of brunch with his fiancée, and from what I heard, he turned pale before even reaching the second page. Hours later, he called me, not to apologize, of course, but to threaten. "You're destroying the family's name," he hissed. "Dad wanted me to lead. You're twisting everything." I didn't raise my voice. I simply replied, "Then why does your version have a digital timestamp that postdates Dad's stroke?" He was silent, dead silent. He hadn't even realized that. He thought forging a will was about the signature. But it's never just about ink, it's about truth. And truth has a way of bleeding through lies, especially when someone like me refuses to stay quiet. Behind the polished veneer of family dinners and business meetings, I became a shadow they couldn't ignore. Invitations stopped, calls went unanswered. But inside, I was building something no one could see, a quiet fortress of patience and strategy. I spent nights reviewing documents, talking to witnesses, collecting memories that others dismissed as irrelevant. Each little detail was a thread in the tapestry of justice I was weaving. I never raised my voice at the table or made a scene at the office. Instead, I let their arrogance do the work for me. They underestimated my silence, mistook my absence for weakness. But in that silence, I was reborn, unstoppable, deliberate, preparing for the moment when the truth would speak louder than their lies. The day of the court hearing arrived like a silent storm. The courtroom was packed, familiar faces, curious eyes, and the weight of unspoken accusations. My brother sat confidently, surrounded by his lawyers and supporters. I walked in alone, carrying only my folder, the original will nestled safely inside. When the judge called the case, the room fell into a tense hush. The lawyer I hired presented the document, each word unfolding like a slow-burning revelation. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge held up the signed will, glanced at my brother, and asked, "Do you recognize this signature as your father's?" His forced nod betrayed the truth. But the court record showed the digital timestamp on the forged will was created after the original had been securely stored. His silence spoke volumes. I didn't smile. I didn't scream. I simply exhaled. Justice, in its quietest form, had arrived. The courtroom emptied, but the echoes lingered. Outside, whispers followed me like shadows, some curious, others resentful. My brother's world had cracked, but his pride kept him silent. I watched from a distance as his allies drifted away, one by one, like leaves in a cold wind. The family dinners stopped altogether. Invitations turned into cold shoulders. Yet, I felt lighter, not because of the estate or the money, but because the truth had been heard. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. They underestimated me, but I was reborn from their neglect, silent, steady, unstoppable. The inheritance was mine, yes, but more than that, I inherited my father's dignity and the power to rewrite my own story. And this time, I wrote it on my terms. Months passed. The estate was legally mine, but reclaiming it wasn't just about papers or property. It was about reclaiming my place in a family that tried to erase me. I didn't make grand announcements or post victories on social media. Instead, I returned quietly to the vineyard, stepping into rooms that once felt like foreign territories. Workers who whispered my name stopped, and eyes that once dismissed me now acknowledged my presence with hesitant respect. I was no longer just the daughter who was given love. I was the woman who endured, who waited, and who won without shouting. The silence I carried was not weakness, it was strength, and with every step, I rebuilt not only what was mine, but who I was meant to be. No one asked how I managed to hold on, or how I stayed composed when the world seemed set to bury me alive. The truth was, every whispered insult, every closed door, was a lesson carved deep into my soul. I learned that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet resolve that breaks the strongest chains. My brother's betrayal became the soil from which my resilience grew. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I refused to let bitterness root in my heart. I moved forward with a silent grace, knowing the greatest victories are those that speak without words. The inheritance wasn't just land or money. It was a testament to a woman reborn from neglect, rising unstoppable from the ashes of exclusion. Just when I thought the dust had settled, unexpected allies appeared. Old family friends, distant cousins, even some of Dad's business partners started reaching out. They saw what I had endured, recognized the injustice, and quietly offered support. No fanfare, no public declarations, just small gestures that spoke volumes. A phone call here, a helpful document there, invitations to private meetings. Their trust was a bridge to a world I had been shut out from for too long. I realized that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from fighting alone, but from knowing when to accept the hands extended in silent solidarity. This network became my backbone, proof that justice often finds its roots in the quiet corners where true loyalty dwells. The final chapter of our family saga unfolded not in a courtroom, but at a quiet dinner table months later. Invitations were rare, but I accepted. My brother sat across from me, the weight of defeat softened by time and unspoken apologies. We didn't talk about money, or wills, or past betrayals. Instead, we spoke of memories. Dad's laugh, the summers at the lake, the small moments no legal document could capture. I saw something shift in his eyes, regret, maybe, or understanding. I didn't offer forgiveness out loud. I let the silence between us carry it. Because some battles are won not by shouting, but by the quiet power of presence. And as I left that table, I knew the true inheritance was peace, hard-earned, silent, and finally mine. With the past settled, my eyes turned to the future, one I would build on my own terms. The vineyard, the estate, the house by the lake, all became symbols not of a battle won, but of a legacy restored. I invited those who truly mattered to join me, not out of obligation, but from shared respect and new beginnings. I invested in the land, not just to grow grapes, but to nurture hope, healing, and renewal. And through it all, I kept one quiet promise to myself: never again would I be invisible. The silence that once threatened to swallow me became my voice, my power, my shield. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the unstoppable woman who turned betrayal into her greatest comeback. Years later, as I stand overlooking the vineyard bathed in golden light, I realized the true inheritance wasn't the land or the money. It was the strength forged in silence, the dignity reclaimed without shouting, the justice won through patience and quiet resolve. The family that tried to erase me is now a distant chapter. One I close with grace, not vengeance. I didn't scream. I smiled. They expected me to disappear. I didn't. I was reborn from their neglect, unstoppable and whole. This legacy isn't written on paper. It's etched in the silence between words, in the space where true power lives. And that power is mine, forever. Thank you for watching until the end. If you've ever lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the loudest impact is made in silence.